Hey guys, welcome to the Rad Season Show. I'm super excited to be joined today by eight-time BMX and mountain biking world champion Caroline Buchanan. Caroline, how are you?
I'm good. I'm currently in Auckland in hotel quarantine. So I've made the journey over here. I've got some upcoming events and yeah, part of Australia, New Zealand, we've had this like hotel quarantine 14-day system. So I'm 3 days in.
And this isn't the first one, right? You've done this a couple of times.
Yeah, 4 times now. So when everything kicked off, I actually moved from California. I lived in California for 10 years. So I
Okay.
made that move back to Australia. That was one of the very first flights into Australia that they started this quarantine thing. So I did my 14 days and then competed in Italy at a World Cup on the way home, quarantine again. And then recently went to Audi Nines in Germany, came home, quarantine again, and now I'm in New Zealand. So yeah, 2 months of the last year I've spent in a hotel room.
That's crazy. And why did you decide to come back from California?
It was actually like initially I'd always planned within the next 5 years time window that I
Okay.
would come back to Australia. Long term, I always wanted to be back there. I just didn't really know the timeline. And yeah, I think when just COVID kicked off, my family, my friends, everyone was in Australia. So
Yeah.
I just grabbed all my bikes and went back and wasn't sure, was Olympics or all these things going to be cancelled? And sure enough, they were. And just from there, I put everything in storage. One of my friends basically moved out of my apartment, so I wasn't paying. And I haven't been back. So half my life is in storage in California, and I'll sort it out next year.
And whereabouts did you move to? Did you move back to like where you grew up or?
Exactly back to Canberra to my roots, where it all began. So it's been a really like refreshing journey to kind of touch back in after being away for so long. Now the mountain biking's really progressed in my home city and a fair few opportunities. And initially we had a lot of freedom. It's only been the last couple of months that it's been a little less freedom. So yeah, I think I made like that good choice. There were so many pros about moving to America as an action sport athlete. The industry's there
Yeah.
to travel, obviously, to all the international events. It was quite simple just to pop in and out of LAX. So, yeah, I enjoyed it. I lived in wine country down in Temecula, and you're surrounded by the Robbie Madisons, the Vicky Goldens, like all those moto, BMX, mountain bike, action sport people.
And was that kind of the initial reason to go there, just to kind of be immersed in it and be sort of surrounded by the scene, so to speak?
Yeah, it definitely was. Like at the time, I didn't have your clothing sponsors, your helmet sponsors, all these things. So a lot of that Fast House, Bell, Oakley, that industry, Max's Tires, they're all
Yeah.
there. So to be able to call in and, be a bit more present, yeah, it made a big difference to definitely the start of my career.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd love to touch on that whole kind of growing up in Canberra and that upbringing. I mean, it's so outdoorsy Australia, right? And there's like like I used to live in Sydney, and kind of like now, like looking back on it, it's just like you're pretty much spending all your time outside. And I mean, like growing up, would you say you were kind of exposed to like all these different sports super early on, or?
Yeah, so early. And I think I've always said that to any parents with kids. I've said to them, like, don't specialize in sport at an early age. I think that was one of the biggest foundations that set me up for a diverse BMX mountain bike multidiscipline career. Was when I grew up in Canberra, I did everything. We lived opposite a pine forest, so I started golf at a young age. My dad played golf. So between golf, tennis, taekwondo, when I was 9, I had to decide between a black belt in taekwondo and to go to the BMX World Championships in Paris. So I was basically just like doing every sport.
Yeah.
And I strongly believe like getting that foundation of skills and movement, also not burning out quite young too, because I was 5 when I started racing. If I'd, done that for 30 years, then it would, be a long career. So yeah, Canberra was a really good foundation. It was the capital of Australia, but a much smaller city.
Yeah.
The ACT Academy of Sport there, it was a feeder into our Australian Institute of Sport. So I really had that pathway right in front of me to go from the state level to the national level to the world level and have those resources to be in gyms early at 14 years old, getting the foundations of training and structure and everything like that. So yeah, it really was a nice stepping stone through.
Yeah. And what would you say, like what was the appeal of, I guess, individual sports? So kind of looking at cycling, what kind of like sort of stuck out there?
I think for me as a kid, I was 3 years old. We went to the video store back then, and my mom said, we're walking down the aisle, and she thought that I was going to pick out this Disney film, and I picked out Nadia Comaneci's Perfect 10. I was doing gymnastics at the time. And she thinks, like, why does this 3-year-old want this, like, documentary on, an Olympic gymnast? And she said I was just fascinated by it. We'll just watch it over and over and over again. So my parents kind of knew quite early, like, this girl is maybe a high achiever. Maybe she's going to be interested in sport. And from then, like in soccer, I was always playing team sports, but I struggled with the fact that I wanted to score the goal. I wanted to save the goal. And once I really found BMX riding, the individual aspect of knowing that success is on you and that failure is on you, like I love that pressure. I love that heat of the moment. So I wasn't really a team sport person. I really liked that ownership and the fact that, yeah, with those individual sports, you could really be creative and create your own identity and career out of it, which luckily today with social media and everything else, like it's been a real blessing to be an individual female athlete, especially in cycling.
And were like who did you kind of look up to back then? Because your brother was into BMX as well, right? And like was there a group of you at school doing it, or like when you were
it was all the boys. When I actually started at 5 years old at my local track, there was no girls. So up until the age of 13-ish, I really raced the boys. I even traveled over here to New Zealand for Mighty 11. So it was like a trans-Tasman, Australia versus New Zealand. And yeah, I was just in competing with the boys back then. Luke Medill and some other Olympic Australian athletes, like they were my heroes back then. It wasn't until I was about 16 that I really started getting support from other female athletes and role models. So to me, mentors like Lane Beachley, they were the ones really at that turning point of becoming that 14-year-old girl that's questioning, do I really want to do sport for my career in the long term, or do I want to chase boys in school and all these other like distractions? And Lane Beachley called me up one day and she simply said, like, I believe in you. I'd won one of her scholarships. And so, yeah, not only that financial aspect, it was more the fact that a 7-time world surfing champion called me and just said, I believe in you and I'm here to support you. So she stripped away like a bunch of limiting beliefs for me really early, because she actually said, you're going to win world titles. And I was like, at that point, I'd been going to world championships since I was 9 years old in BMX, because you can start really young. Mm-hmm. And I'd got a bunch of seconds and thirds and seconds and seconds and seconds. And I'd never won a world title. So it took until I was 18 years old to actually win my very first one. And that was in mountain biking. So yeah, Lane, she said, you know what, like, I'm here with you all the way along and I can't wait for you to win 8. And I looked at her and was like, 8? How am I going to beat you? I'm like, you're my role model. And it was a really funny story. Like when I did win 8, I came back to her and said, you know what, like, I think you planted that seed in me just to believe in myself. I never thought I'd do it. So she was pretty stoked, and yeah, to share that moment together.
And were you kind of having like, I mean, if you were getting all these seconds and thirds and stuff, was there doubt there? And she was kind of obviously, showing you like she's got there, like she's got 7. This is what can be done, and like having that encouragement. Do you reckon that's sort of what did it, or were you sort of like going into like you probably weren't thinking about records back then, right? I mean, it's not like
no, not at all. No,
you just think about the race, and then
you're thinking about really the process of it all and the struggles you go through at the time. And, it's everything from the pressure, the teammates, the bullying, the expectation, like whatever it was at the moment, I could turn to her and just be like, how did you handle this? Like, how did you handle a big target on your back, or, the critics, or whatever it is? Like, I could just come to her with a question. She's such an honest person that I think like one was, I remember she said, you know, that when she was out in the water, she would always picture like, yeah, she had this big arrow on her back, but it was more like a mirror. And she would really like to like use it as that mirror to distract herself from, you know, her opponents or competitors.
Yeah.
And so she was a real visual learner, and that helped me with different things like facing fear. And with her, it was waves. With me, it was coming into jumps. So yeah, she was one of them, but I was really fortunate enough to have a great support network of many mentors. Robert De Castella, who was also a Olympic marathon champion runner. So yeah, completely other sport, but he was local to my hometown, Canberra.
Mm-hmm.
He helped me with so many things like diet and
Okay.
trying to steer away from grains and gluten quite early, which was one thing that really helped with my recovery. So yeah, I mean, you pull pieces from so many different people in your career, and my parents were also big ones too.
Yeah. And what about the kind of the training and sort of that element of it? Because you started training pretty young as well, right? Early on, like
Yeah,
so
very young when I look back.
where did that come from? Was that sort of something that you were kind of keen to do
Yeah,
yourself, or
my poor parents. I was pretty keen to be surrounded quite early. When I was 9, my mum and dad got me a PT at the local gym because I hated the fact that my brother and my dad and everyone would go and do these like circuit programs at the time. So I wasn't technically meant to be in a gym, but I was able to get the PT, and I wasn't allowed to be on any of the equipment for these circuits, but I was able to do the run with the family and like real body weight proprioception type stuff. So yeah, fortunate enough, this local gym in Canberra allowed me to do that. And from there, about 9 to 11, I sort of stuck to that local gym.
Mhm.
And then my dad actually approached the ACT Academy of Sport. And at that point, they hadn't had programs that young either. So my dad just said, what do we need to pay to get this girl into this gym? Like, she wants to be surrounded by other like-minded athletes. And he was a big believer that, you know, I need to be in that pathway. And so I think I was about 13 at that point when I got into the ACT Academy of Sport. And by the time that I was 16 years old, I was in what they call their 100 club. So it meant from 13 to 16, they taught me all the fundamentals of lifting, snatching, all the Olympic lifts.
Mm-hmm.
And by, that 16 years, I was able to join the 100 club, which meant I was able to squat 100 kilos at the time. So it was either bench, squat, deadlift. So I was able to deadlift 100, squat 100, which was great for BMX racing. It's all a power sport. So obviously your strength and your speed gets you out of that gate early and out of trouble in those hole shots. Yeah, so I think for me, like, naturally I wanted to be training and I wanted to be successful. So I had those right tools and the right people around me.
Yeah. And would you say, like, I mean, like having that travel experience as well, quite young, and competing overseas, and seeing the sort of different levels kind of outside of Australia and like worldwide. I mean, like, were you kind of feeding off that as well at the time?
Huge eye opener. I first went to Paris at 9 years old for the Worlds, and I remember seeing all the country flags lined up, and it was like that little mini Olympic opening ceremony. I saw there was all these other girls, and there was the pros, and being exposed to go, this could potentially be my career long term. I don't think at that point the women were full-time in BMX. Like, it was, I wanted to be something in the future that I couldn't see. So my whole career has been like that. I never knew BMX was going to come to Olympics. You know, I never knew that mountain biking, all these things were going to pop up. But back then, I think it was really good because I learned the hard way. Like, I failed. And my first World Championships, I went over there with a brand new bike, but I had secondhand pedals. So I unclipped in the second. It was like the semi-final when you needed to get a top 4 to qualify through for the final. And I ended up 5th because I'd unclipped out of the gate. And it was like, I'd gone all the way to Paris, brand new bike, secondhand clips, unclipped. So yeah, you know, all these like tiny little lessons just added up. And to debrief afterwards and go like, I'm never having secondhand clips ever again to go into a World Championship event. Like, I was so mad. They're the blessings of to go back again the second time, which we then went to Holland the next year and I got second. And then we went back to Paris again. I got second again. And that was like a little bit of the next 5 world titles. Next 5 world championship events were similar along those.
And when it kind of like got to that Olympic conversation, and the like BMX racing was going to then be in the Olympics. I mean, how did that change? I guess the sport at the time. I mean, and the kind of the involvement, the level of funding, that kind of thing, and sort of how you approached it as well. Did you kind of think like, all right, this is gonna change, or this is the career, like definitely the certain career path now?
Yeah, well, it completely changed everything. At 15, I jumped on a mountain bike. I like lost a bet with a friend, and he had to come to a BMX race, and I had to go to a mountain bike race. It was the best bet I've ever lost. So around 15, 16, I was doing BMX and mountain biking and started to hear rumors that BMX racing would be an Olympic sport. At that time, racing, we were coming off 5-meter hills or less, and the tracks didn't really have pro straights or any of these big features. They were quite generic to just your standard local club BMX track.
Mm.
So at 17 years old, they announced BMX was going to be the Olympics. There was now World Cup rounds. There was these qualifiers. And they changed the start hill. So the Olympic Committee wanted, BMX racing to be more gnarly, more spectacular. So they brought in like 3-story start hill, about 8.5 meters tall. And that changed the whole dynamic of BMX. It went from a sport that was, you'd have to have quite a lot of horsepower to get going. So that power to weight ratio was like really, really important. So at that time, the smaller start hills, you're lighter, more like fast twitch, explosive athletes were doing really well. You then bring in a 8.5 meter start hill where speed's given to you, and the jumps get bigger. The skill factor really went through the roof then. So a lot of the more musclier athletes, a lot of those ones that maybe are carrying more body fat that hadn't done well in the past had now excelled in this Olympic sport. So it did change the way that we trained as well.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point I was like, I need to put on weight because I need to get down this hill. Like, I'm up against 80-kilo girls and I'm 63 kilos. And they're just pumping the bottom of the transition and pulling away from me. So I went down a little bit of a wrong avenue and, I was like, I just need to put on weight. I needed to put on muscle. I didn't need to put on fat. So at that point, I think I'd put on like 5 kilos or so and, thought I was doing the right thing. But it was really like, I just needed to put on that healthy weight. So over the next couple of years of my career leading into what was going to be my first Olympics, the focus was really building that strength and conditioning in the gym, getting my numbers up to 140 kilo deadlifts, 150 kilo squats, 90 kilo power cleans. That was a level coming in 2012 of what I was able to lift. And that directly translated onto these, what we call supercross tracks in the Olympics. That got me out of the hill, the first initial 5 pedals over the kink, is what we call it.
Mm-hmm.
When you've got your bar in front, like a centimeter, it makes all the difference at the bottom of the hill to be able to pump the transition, step away over the first 13-meter jump, and get that whole shot into the first corner. So, BMX in the Olympics really changed the whole dynamics of who did well. And I actually hated it initially. I remember the first time dropping into the hill, and I was up there. It was an indoor arena. They built this hill where our heads were basically touching the roof. The first
was this in London or?
No, the first World Cup was in Adelaide. It was actually in Australia, the first one I did. The first jump had just had concrete in between. You couldn't roll it. So the first time you drop in, you just have to pedal down and commit to this first jump. I remember I was like bawling my eyes out and I had tears coming down my face, and I dropped in and I was like, I don't want to do this. And jumped it, got through to the qualifiers, and that was my first Supercross experience. But for me, I was never really that athlete that enjoyed like that fear. I was never really the first one to like jump the triples or jump these huge features. And then it was like, boom, here's Olympics. we're throwing the biggest, gnarliest tracks at these girls and at all the athletes straight away. And it was sink or swim, really. So a lot of people left the sport at that time, and a lot of the athletes stepped up. So too young for Beijing. At that point, I was 17. You had to be 19 for BMX. So missed Beijing and came into London as my first Olympics.
And like, would you say, I mean, like you were saying, with those features changing, do you reckon having that background in mountain biking and full cross, did that help with some aspects of it? I mean, you were kind of, you know.
It definitely did. I was fresh at the time to mountain biking. So I'd only been doing it a couple of years, but competing in four cross, which was the mountain bike category that I did at the time, it's similar to border cross in snowboarding. You've got 4 athletes, moguls, turns, and it's that 4-minute course down a track. I think because I was used to some of the speeds of mountain biking, that was really what changed, that high speed element and doing those like longer jumps versus what used to be BMX. So yeah, I'm glad at the time that I was doing that, because it did prepare me to be, you know, one of those sort of first initial 25 girls on the World Cup tour that progressed through to that first Olympics.
Nice. And then after that, I mean, like what happened after London then? Like, what was kind of like what sort of changed in your mindset then? And like, what were you kind of, were you thinking about the next one, or did you just want to kind of change completely away from Olympics?
Well, London, so coming to my first Olympics, a little bit of the foundation, like my biggest sponsor at the time was my bike brand, and it was $7,000. Like, I'm still living off mum and dad. BMX racing's like new. We were like the BMX bandits of the games. I remember being like the full outcasts and all these like core Olympic sports. It was like, especially the Summer Olympics, there was no action sports at that time.
Yeah.
They were all in the Winter Olympics. So yeah, I remember feeling like, do we belong here? Like, I don't know. But I came into that first games. I remember just like this like feeling of just like the weight of a nation. You know, I came out of nowhere with the media and the commercials, car sponsors. Like, at the time I had Mitsubishi, and I remember coming in and I was so nervous for that final. I ticked all the boxes. I'd won the time trial, all my heats, the quarterfinal, the semi-final. So I'd got to that Olympic moment, to that start line in the final, done the whole process, and I started backpedaling and got into a defensive mindset versus that offensive mindset that got me there. You know, I'd stuck to the process. I'd done what I knew. And it was like, I then instantly got in that defensive mindset, started looking at my competitors, the Colombian, which had had amazing gate starts all day, the British that carried the flag for the nation, and she was on the Visa commercial and she just signed Red Bull, and, you know.
So were you just thinking about everything then, right? Like,
everything.
just
absolutely everything you can think of. You know,
I
look into the crowd and David Beckham staring back at me and the royal family, and, you know, you just start like getting swallowed. That was the feeling for me. So I should have gone lane 1, which is like the inside lane advantage, but I derailed, and that would be my plan all along. So I decided I didn't want Sinead Reid from Great Britain to cut me off. I was too worried about her influencing my Olympics. This is how I was thinking at the time. And so I decided to go lane 3, like trying to run away from her, thinking that I could like protect this Olympic result, that it was like mine to win, versus being hungry. I should have gone, I'm going to go lane 1, repeat process, get out in front, out of trouble, and win the race and do what I'd always done. So I'm there in lane 3 and I knew it. I was like, I've blown it. What am I doing? I was like, now the fastest gate starter of the whole weekend is next to me, Mariana Pajon from Colombia. She's in lane 4. Now she's going to cut me off. So sure enough, I get out. She'd had fastest starts all day. She cuts me off and goes through and takes the win. I'm in like 7th in the first turn, fight back to 5th, come through the finish line and like look up, and I'm like, all the medals are in front of me. I'm in 5th, like I've blown it. It's my worst result all year. I'd won 6 world titles coming into I'd won 6 World Cups coming into the Olympics. So it was my worst result all year. And I was at the Olympics, and I knew that it was in one split decision and a quick mindset change that could have changed all of that. So
Yeah.
from that, I went home and, reassessed everything. And my goal was, it was like, I not only want to be able to handle pressure, I want to make sure that I stay in that mindset of winning and, not get defensive and not be on the back foot and all the things that had happened in that Olympic moment. So I set a goal to win 3 world titles in 3 different countries, 3 different energy systems, 3 different cycling disciplines in 76 days. That was my goal. I was like, if I can handle this, then I can go into another Olympics and not choke. So the rebound from 2012 Olympics was one of the best things that ever happened to me. It taught me really what I was capable of. And the first one kicked off. So it was the BMX World Championships were in New Zealand. That was first stop. So went to the indoor BMX World Championships. It was a 30-second track. I got up on that start gate. I've been really working on my chi breathing. I'd gone to meditation retreats. Like I was sitting up there. I was focusing on my breath. I was controlling my emotions. I lead the start. I get out ahead of Mariana Pajon, who just cut me off at the last Olympics. I hadn't competed since then. I get that whole shot. I go through. I take the win. I win my first BMX world title 6 months after the Olympics. And stoked. For me, that was that little bit of redemption and wow. So from there, flew across to South Africa, which was the downhill world championships. So downhill mountain biking, whole different energy system, much more endurance, 6-minute long course, big jumps, heaps of pedaling, rock gardens. Came down and finished 5th for that downhill world championships. So my goal was 3 world titles, which is pretty gnarly, but managed to come down in 5th for that one. Then flew across to Austria for the 4-cross mountain bike world championships, so this is all like 3 to 4 weeks apart. Flying, traveling, switching bikes. Went across to the 4-cross world, won that 4-cross world title. So walked away from.
Were you traveling on your own, or like did you have a team like with you?
I picked up like with the Australian teams along the way, but at the time, it was kind of some solo parts, staying with friends in Europe, and like getting bikes, offloading bikes. It was like on to the next. Like it was just quite a logistical nightmare, I think, at the time to make it all happen. But finished that year, and it was like that year after that Olympics. I then finished the next year, and there was the accolades, the Australian Athletes of the Year, the Making Cycling History, all these things. But I knew then it was like I walked away from that year, 2 world titles. But the biggest thing I learned was for that whole entire year, it was that offensive mindset. It was setting this like huge goal, 3 world titles. But it was just like, sticking to the process, enjoying it, being hungry, like wanting more. And not being like, how can I protect this? And like, this is my race to win. And, what obviously derailed me at the Olympic Games. So that's for any athletes listening, I totally recommend if you're a multidiscipline athlete or you have opportunity to do more. Because I think it is when you do less and you start protecting, that's when I think for me, I lost that performer that likes going out there and shines and is hungry.
And would you say like with the breathing and sort of meditation, I mean, I spoke to Robbie Madison about this, and he was sort of saying, before he kind of gets into doing any of these gnarly stunts, which he's been, planning for 6 months or longer or years, and kind of like going into this headset, like this kind of space where he's completely in the moment, and then just sort of breathing, before he's going to do it. Would you say like that? Were you kind of looking at things differently, like when you got into that? And
I definitely was, because to control your mindset, you need to control your breath. So those meditation retreats that I did, like I went to a full-on meditation, like Buddhist retreat, and the chi breathing was to breathe into like your center core, which is about sort of 3 centimeters below your belly button. to have the conscious mindset and the ability when you're in those pressure cooker moments, you're on that start gate, you've got a 10-second window before you're about to drop in. That's all I started focusing on. And that was the difference in choking versus not choking. And so for me, what I would do is I'd like look up into the stand and I'd be like grateful. So this sounds like, obviously back then, one of my psychologists was like, I really want you to not think about the result of this World Cup. I really want you to think about being grateful for the Australian fans that are watching. I want you to be grateful for whatever you can see that's external. And I was like, righto, this is like a load of whatever. You know, I'm this like action sport athlete that didn't want to think about breath and mindfulness and gratefulness and all this stuff. But that was what changed the result of my racing. So I'm up there for that first BMX World title. And I remember sitting in the gate and I had like my fingers just like below my belly button and I'm like breathing into that space and I'm just sitting there calm and I'm like looking at all the Aussies in the crowd. I'm like, oh, I'm so grateful. Like, look at these like amazing supporters and blah, blah. And then boom, like gate drops within that sort of 10-second window. And I was able to turn that mindset really quickly into getting one of the best gates of my life and taking the lead. So yeah, the breath work, that mindfulness, that ability to control your emotions hugely impacts performance.
Yeah.
I took that, I guess you could say, to like the next level on our camps and things that we had post these world championships. The Australian high performance team started realizing like, oh, okay, I really think we need to start doing more. So we did a lot of underwater breath work, holding our breath, you know, taking yourself to those stress moments and knowing that you can go that little bit further. And then did another 7-day long meditation retreat actually in America at the time. And that was like 90% noble silence. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. You go into this week and it was like, you just have to sit with yourself. So sit with yourself, sit with your emotions. Yeah,
I really want to do that. My wife's like, yeah, you got to go on one of those. You just keep on talking too much, you know. So send him over there, you know. They can be quiet. Maybe he'll come back and it won't be like jibber jabbering so much. How did you find it? Was it tough?
Yeah, so tough, especially for me. I'm like quite ADHD and like, you know, always wanting to go ride. And I love, my whole life is fight or flight. You know, I'm going into jump and features and things that I've never hit on all these different tracks. So you constantly have this high level of adrenaline. So the wind down from that was really good. Actually, for me, it helped my recovery long term. I was getting quite run down at the time and struggling to keep up with my training loads. So the more I was able to actually like switch off, I started bringing that into my daily practices of even gym. So the simple things of like, I do my 2-hour gym workouts where I'm like lifting Olympic lifts, you know, my 140 kilo squats. But I'd make myself put on my guided calming meditation, lay on the floor right as I've finished gym, and dedicate that next 20 minutes to that. And I found that I was able to recover so much quicker because you would go from this like state in a gym session, but then you were able to calm your whole nervous system, and then I was able to recover faster. So I'd make myself do that for every gym session. So by the time I left and then I ate, and then, you know, you're recovering, you're present. But that just steamrolled that recovery process.
That's interesting. And this was probably like, I mean, like with social media and the responsibilities as an athlete, kind of when that kicked in with sponsors and partners and everything. I mean, I guess doing that, then it's a break from that as well when you're in that state, and kind of, you know, after those gym sessions, when you're doing that, you can kind of, you know, you sort of switching off from technology apart from, you know, what you're actually listening to. How did you find, when sort of social entered into what you were doing and kind of, you know, became daily life and something that is then a job onto a job of an athlete, I guess, right?
Well, I guess I could say I learnt the hard way a little bit with the Olympics. So 2012 was really like the social media Olympics. It was like, for me, it was that boom of all these sponsors and, you know, this whole step in my career. They were trying to do like social media blackouts and control everything. And I remember getting to the Olympic Village, and I got into the Australian arena, and basically our Olympic Village where it was, we'd had these like boxes, and I was like, the rumors are true. We've got these boxes of condoms. And I was this like young athlete coming in, and I didn't directly tweet about it for myself, but I was like, haha, rumors are true, Athlete Village. And I like posted a photo, and it was of this like kangaroo condoms for the gland down under, these boxes for Australia. It was very Aussie, and went viral. So it was like the best and worst thing I've ever done. Wasn't because of what I was posting. There was
just wake up and look at your phone the next day. Like,
oh my God, I did. I woke up the next day.
Done?
Hollywood News, this internal investigation into like why there's Durex and a different brand of condom in the Olympic Village. And, you know, so then there was this huge like brand war because Australia had ran out. So they'd put a different brand in. And I just happened to tweet about it and whatever. So social media blew up. I remember at that point, it was like the media liaisons came into me and they're like, you're on Hollywood News. Turn your phone off. You're here to compete. Like, you cannot post anything more. Like, yes, your social media just went up, whatever it was at the time, like 20,000 people overnight, you know, on Facebook, which was huge back then.
Yeah.
So yeah, social media, I learned quite quick. I was like, oh my gosh, you need to be really careful with it. But yeah, super important for my career because for BMX, it was a grassroots sport. So I had actually media help quite early. I employed a lady, and she would, when I'd get home from World Cups, we'd like package it onto TV. We'd deliver it to the TV stations, and we really hand fed the Australian media because she was really on this like team around me with like my manager at the time, my parents, my mechanic, my media lady. We knew that I wasn't going to be able to make a career out of BMX racing unless we grew the entire sport at the same time. So we put it so much into making sure that when the media people on a Monday after the grand finals of football, that they were not only getting the football footage, but they were making sure that they got the BMX World Cup in Monaco that I just won, for example. So we were really like hand feeding media and delivering that to make sure that the profile of the sport raised. And as the profile of the sport raised in Australia, then it meant, you know, those doors opened for not only myself for the future, but I could actually make a career out of BMX. So yeah, there was quite a big strategic window around media and the presence to build that initially. And then, yeah, fortunate now with social media that it's become probably the biggest part of my career now with brands and endorsements. Currently working with the likes of Ford Australia. I've got a Microsoft campaign next week to release Windows 11. Nice. And all of these contracts are around social. So, yeah, I do love it. I've learned to love it. But initially I hated it and I was scared of it.
And I mean, you must have felt like quite a lot of responsibility then. I mean, if like bringing the sport forward, and then, you know, it wasn't just about you riding. It's actually, you know, it's for everyone, and it's trying to sort of look at it going like, how can we get more exposure for what we're doing? And
yeah, definitely. And I think, you know, now I can look back, and that's why I've started Buchanan Next Gen, which was my first scholarship program. And I rebranded it a month ago to Ignite. So, yeah, to sit here now, I've tallied it up last week, and I've been managed to put 91,000 Australian dollars back into women in sport in Australia. And I've helped, in those last 7 years, 12 girls go to the BMX World Championships. So helping giving them that exposure that I had at a young age. And, you know, when I had someone believe in me, I can now believe in them. So it's been so rewarding. The rebrand of it has been the best thing I've ever done. The world changed and we couldn't go to World Championships. So Ignite, basically the girls a month ago opened the applications, and it was they had to write to me and tell me where they are in their career now and how I can help them get to where they need to be. They've got a 4-month window to achieve this project goal. And it was absolutely anything that they could pitch. So they had $5,000, and that was going to go $4,000 towards the project and $1,000 towards a content budget to document it. So teaching them the value of content, documenting it. They've got to tag the sponsor. They've got to do this, work with videographers. I mentor them through it. So 13
What
to
were they asking you?
-year-old,
Just like everything, like the whole from
everything. So 13 to 19-year-old girls in Australia in BMX, mountain bike, and moto. So open the whole category up. I mean, some were, a dad wrote in, oh, my 3-year-old daughter. I was like, you haven't read the brief. But some of them were absolutely amazing. So the 3 girls that won, the motocross girl, Taylor Thompson, she's heading to Europe next year for the Moto MXGP. So her project was all around, they have a supercross track in their backyard, and basically they need to make it more of that European standard. So the full diggers, dirt, machinery, drainage systems, make it European. So that was her scholarship. So she's getting prepared for Europe for the start of next year. Then we've got the mountain bike girl, and hers was amazing. It was like, we understand the value of brand, and we really want Layla to invest into this. So hers was a full digital marketing media package, everything from YouTube banners to how to write mailing reports to a website, logo, like everything brand, media, social.
Yeah.
So hers was a $4,000 package on that. So she's going to be doing workshops and learn how to use Canva, learn, everything you could possibly imagine. So that was hers. And then the BMX girl, she's freestyle BMX. Her name's Sarah Nicky, and she's likely to go to the next Olympics for Australia. She's 15 years old. And so hers was, she wanted an airbag and 16 one-on-one coaching sessions with a local freestyle coach. And she had her trick list. So the evolution of where she is now to where she needs to be in the next 4 months to prepare for Oceanas. So that was the likes of, the first 3 rounds of my scholarships. And I've got some mentor calls from them in this next week whilst I'm here in quarantine. So looking forward to that.
That's cool. And what's the plan for that? Are you going to try and expand that out either sort of across Australia or kind of open it up to people overseas as well? Or?
Well, my goalpost was initially I just wanted to be able to give 100K. That was my goal. 100K back into women in sport. I'll do that within the next 4 months, which is awesome.
Nice.
The goalpost is I currently have an auction for one of my race bikes that will directly go back into another ignition, so another scholarship. I've got merch coming with Fist Handwear, which is a glove sponsor I ride for. So gloves, socks, tees, all those royalties will go back into igniting more scholarships. So there's the merch side of it. And working with more brands. So Rubik 3 is the sponsor that has sponsored this one. But I'd love to get more brands on board. So partnering with global brands and making, there's some girls in America and some people I'm keeping my eyes on. So that's kind of the goal, is to make it global. And with this new structure, we can make it global because they can come to me with anything. Like the 3 that I've chose are so broad, but it's directly impacting the next 4 months of their life and a huge stepping stone to their future.
Yeah, cool. And on a personal note, I mean, you've accomplished something pretty sick recently with the Audi 9s over in Germany. Can you tell us a bit more about that and sort of the whole, the project and kind of what you were trying to set out to do over there?
Yeah, so it was wild timing. I was training for BMX racing. I wanted this to be my last Olympic Games in Tokyo. And I knew it was going to be a tight turnaround. I'd spent 3 years out of the sport with multiple injuries and surgeries from an off-road vehicle accident. So I was training to be back at these games. My body and my numbers were where they needed to be. But with COVID, there was a few issues and World Cups delayed and everything else. So it was going to be a real challenge for me to make the team. It was actually a blessing in disguise because the day that I got a phone call to say, you haven't made criteria to go to this Olympic Games for Tokyo, the next day I got a phone call from Audi 9s and they were like, hey, women's freeride mountain bike is booming. We've never had girls in Audi 9s. We're going to bring 9 girls from across the world and we want you to be one of them. I was like, sign me up. At this point, I don't know how I'm going to leave Australia. We've got all these like quarantines and whatever. I'm not doubly vaccinated at that point. Like, I don't know if I can come. But I was like, I'll come. So
We'll say yes and figure it out later on, right? It's like,
yeah, I was like, I'll work that out. Worked it out. So Audi 9s started in the snow world. And it was really that week progression that the best athletes in the world could come together. They could build the most epic courses that photograph and content-wise look incredible. And they could push their progression with like-minded people. They could send those world firsts. So that crossed over into the mountain bike side of it with the men. And so for us girls, we were going in there completely blind. Like we didn't know how big this quarry was really going to be in Germany. And it was huge. So we walked in the first day and it was like Disneyland, like, oh my gosh, what are we going to ride? What are we going to do? Never done this before.
Was it all built before you guys got there, or did you could kind of
they had like
change things around a little bit?
It was like 6 full-time diggers for like 2 weeks in a quarry, just like building this epic stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, we got in there and they built this like new jam line, which was a smaller feature course for us, but we were able to ride everything else. So there was the freeride line, more of the slope style line, and then we had like a trick jump at the bottom of our course. So for me, I'd been practicing the last couple of weeks at home. I have an airbag. So where I live in Australia, it's actually, I live on a property with my boyfriend, John Pruddy. He does moto and I do mountain biking. So our backyard is like this full moto freestyle BMX mountain bike motocross compound. It was everything we needed. So I had my airbag and I've been practicing. I'd landed 3 front flips to the airbag and I was going into the Audi 9s knowing no mountain bike women have ever landed a front flip to dirt. This could be a world's first. So I was kind of prepared that if like it was the perfect scenario jump, like send this front flip. And I get there and I knew the jump was a little bit taller and shorter. So it meant I needed to change my rotation and pull back earlier to speed it up. And I hadn't practiced that. So I was like, okay, I can still do it. I'm probably going to land deep, but I can hang on. I'm strong. And the day that I went to do it, it was like, the cameras and the FPV drone people and everything's on set ready. It's like the perfect environment to land a world's first. Brought the rotation around, landed it first go, and landed a world's first. So it was like a gnarly feeling. It was very different. And I got asked, how does it compare to like winning world titles? Very similar. And for me, I think it was because racing, you're competing against other people. You know, you've got high performance, you've got teams, it's a little bit for everyone else. But in freestyle, I got that sensation that it was for myself. You know, it's really that moment of overcoming the fear talk, that you don't need to do this. Like, why? No, it's overcoming all that fear talk and actually delivering on the day and to walk away.
Was there more camaraderie, would you say, like between like doing that? Was there like, was the vibe like friendlier than obviously, when you're competing?
Yeah.
And you're in stands and you're racing, right? It's kind of like...
Yeah, it's much. Like, I've loved my high performance culture that I've been in my whole life of high performance Olympic sport. But now to be in this free ride movement, which for women is... Oh, sorry, I had it pop up. Now for women's free ride, the industry is really getting behind it all. So there wasn't Audi 9s. There wasn't, they've just started in Utah Formation, which is a stepping stone to Red Bull Rampage for women. So now there's all these stepping stones, and I can definitely see within the next 5 years the goalpost for women's freeride mountain biking. If we can ride the same courses that Nikolai Rogatkin and those men are riding in slope, I truly believe that if the women can get there, that mountain biking will become an Olympic sport probably by 7 years for those next games. I think now with freestyle BMX, surfing, skateboarding, all these other Olympic action sports into the Tokyo Olympics, the mountain bike discipline that could definitely get in there would be that free ride slope style. And the women, I reckon, are about 5 years away from it.
And how many, like, is it just growing with more sort of participation? And obviously, you know, the level is getting better and better. I mean, it's like, do you reckon with brands and things getting and kind of the industry and that thing growing, do you reckon it will be, you reckon like 4 or 5 years then, you think, right?
Yeah, 4 or 5 years, like we're going to be a different landscape already with Crankworks bringing in speed and style and whip off. We're now seeing girls in runs doing backflips and, you know, the things that we've like never seen in women's freeride. So yeah, the platform's there. There's really a group of about 20 girls right now that are fully invested into it. And I think for me, it's just really exciting. You know, for me now, it's more this legacy piece to go, I know I'm not going to be able to hang with these girls in 5 years' time, and I don't want to. But now, like, I'm fortunate that I've had this like great career in BMX and mountain biking already, and the support from Trek and the brands that I ride for, they're just going, be you and be in it, and, you know, leave that legacy and like stoke more girls out and get them involved. And it's like a really refreshing part of my career to do that, and bring this next wave through.
And what are you going to focus on? Are you going to focus on, are you looking at free riding, or are you kind of looking at different parts of the sport? Or
yeah, well, freeride kind of just like encapsulates all of it. My goals, so there was obviously the front flip at Audi 9s. I'd love to go back again to Audi 9s again. There's a couple more world's firsts that I've got on my list at home that haven't been done for mountain bike women. So they'll tick off in the early phases of next year as my goals.
Nice.
But for this Crankworks, I've done pump track and slalom in the past, but this one they've now got speed and style. So the last 2 years they've brought it in, and I haven't been able to compete. So this will be my first speed and style event that I'm doing. It's basically 2 trick features head to head in a dual slalom format. So your speed deducted by your trick gives you your overall result. So yeah, I'm hoping with my BMX racing speed, and a backflip on the top feature and a tuck no hander on the bottom, that I should be able to qualify through to the podium is the goal.
Nice. Cool. Well, yeah, if people want to sort of follow what you're up to, what's the best way?
So best way is Caroline Buchanan. I'm on everything: TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, all the channels. Yeah, jump on, follow the ride.
Cool. Good stuff. Well, Caroline, thanks so much. It's been great talking to you and hearing the journey, and yeah, everything that's going on at the moment. It's really exciting. And yeah, good luck over there. And yeah, I hope quarantine it doesn't drag on too long, and you can kind of, you can get out as soon as possible.
Thank you. No, it's not too bad. I have my ROM WODs, so my mobility stretching every day, gym workouts. We're actually fortunate, me and my partner, we've got given 2 rooms this time. So one is like our gym bike playground. We've moved all the beds off the walls.
Okay.
Yeah, so practicing skills like bar spins and stuff while I'm in quarantine. So fortunately enough, this is probably the best quarantine setup we've ever had.
Nice one. Cool.
Thanks, Ollie.
All right. Thanks, Caroline.
Bye.
Bye.